Welcome to Rude Tunes Arcade. I'm your host RT, and today, guys, we're going to talk about one of my favorite games for the Sega Genesis. And I'm talking about no other than Lakers vs Celtics and the NBA playoffs. Now, there's a reason I praise this game so high among other Sega Genesis NBA games that came out at the time. Actually, they came out a little later. Now, I know there were other NBA games that come out on the Sega Genesis that kind of surpassed this game, but what made this one so special, it was the first time I was seeing the level of realism in a basketball game, because we have to remember, this game came out in 1990, and at that time, the NES was still running in its later end of its life cycle. The Super Nintendo wasn't out yet, and it left the Sega Genesis in a great position where they were kind of king of the hill for a little bit in that small time of window, with their hardware being unmatched. And don't get me wrong, while Double Dribble and Tecmo Basketball were great games for the NES, if I'm just being real, they just couldn't compete with a game like this, because there was nowhere else at the time to play at this level of a realistic basketball game. Now, this was the first of many great Genesis sports titles that would totally dominate the 16-bit era. Now, I will say this, the debate between who the 16-bit titan was regarding Nintendo and Sega has been debated, studied, and discussed for over 30 years. But now with that said, one thing that most agree on that were around during the 16-bit era is that when it came to sports games, the Sega Genesis reigned supreme of the 16-bit era. Now with all that said, what makes this game so great? Well, let's start with the sound. Now this game has some killer tracks for a basketball game, and it included that classic Sega Genesis sound as far as music goes. You know, the wow, you know how Sega did. And another factor that made this thing more prominent than the NES games was the advanced power of the Genesis to produce an awesome stereo sound, music, and effects. Now I have to confess, I enjoyed this music so much when I was a kid that I actually took a tape recorder. You know how they did back in the day, you get a tape recorder, you put it against the TV, and then you play whatever you're gonna play, whether it be a cartoon or a video game or whatever, and you record the music and listen to it later. Yeah, I was guilty of that, and this was one of the games where I actually got the guys to come on court, stand still, and just record the music and then listen to it later on when I'm not playing the game. But to be honest with you, I don't have to do that anymore, but I do download some OSTs sometimes and actually rock them in my car. No shame there. Yeah, I do that. And also the sounds go with the realism of the whistle, the sound of the ref, and so forth. In my opinion, it truly captured the sound of a basketball game. Now as far as graphics, well, this game cooked in that department as well. Even at the start of the game, we are treated to a game pre-show announcement desk with commentary. Now I know some games did have something like an intro, but there were very few games that were doing something this polished at the time. And when you pick your team and you can see the roster, the players actually look like their real life counterparts. I mean, look at the Celtics here. I mean, McHale looks accurate to his real life counterpart. Parrish, aka the Chief, he looks spot on. And I mean, even with the detail of Dennis Johnson, the guy at the bottom, they even included his freckles. Now that was impressive that they would take that much time and level of detail to put the man's freckles on. Now, Larry Bird always confused me. I mean, while it looks like Larry Bird, I always wondered if that was a big stash he was rocking, because you know he had a mustache sometimes he didn't. For the most part, he was kind of clean shaven, or if that's just shadowing of the pixels. So I don't know if this was a year he had a mustache or he just was clean shaven and he just had shadowy pixels, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that one. Was it a stash or just pixels? And not only did they include these things with the profiles, I mean, they actually included these things like minute details, when you're on the court. For example, you got Worthy, and they actually show his goggles that he wears, the iconic goggles that Worthy always wore. I mean, that's a level of detail that we just weren't seeing at the time. And lastly, we take a look at Magic Johnson. He got a serious makeover from that NES counterpart in the NES game, Magic Johnson's Fast Break. You remember that game? Yeah, so this represents Magic Johnson in a light that he could be proud of. Another cool feature that this game did that a lot of games weren't doing at the time was it was the first one, in my opinion, to show in-depth stats like they show here. I mean, it shows the player's stats in heavy detail, including the offensive stats and defensive stats. Even on the court, their human likenesses are well represented with the correct height proportions. And let's take a look at the court. I was always impressed with the details of the hardwood floors. You know how they got them, some of them stained, some of them stained lighter. I mean, that's how it looked on most basketball courts back in the day. And they did a really good job representing that in this game. And the actual bench, the guys on the side, the coaches and everything, they actually look pretty good. And they are active, like when you hit a shot, they jump in the air or whatever. They have some type of expressions. I thought that was a nice touch as well. Now let's talk about the gameplay. The controls are actually pretty simple. You have A to shoot and jump on defense, B passes, and if you're on defense, B switches the players, and C is primarily to steal the ball. Now each team actually plays similar to their NBA counterpart, you know, the team roster they had at the time during that era. For example, Bird killing the threes and Jordan's superior speed and dunking. Now, as far as play mechanics, this game, you can actually pump fake in the game. And one of the major things that really set this game off was the fact that was the variety of dunking animations in the game. They had a tomahawk dunk, they had the famous Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sky hook, and also the game-breaking Chambers dunk from damn near the three-point line, and a host of others. That's not even all of them. They had layups. They had all kind of stuff in this game. Other details that was cool about the game was the fact that if the computer was behind by a large margin in the game, they would take way more three-point shots and try to close the gap. Also, in my opinion, I feel like the game flowed pretty good, and it seemed like all the players would go to their respective position on the field if they were on defense. So if you were on defense, you didn't have to worry too much about trying to switch the guy. Basically, you can have one guy trying to steal the ball, and the rest of your players, as long as you're not using them, would actually play pretty good defense and go to where they're supposed to be posted. And the same thing with offense. And don't be fooled by the speed of the game. Now while this game can be slow at times, you still can get that occasional fast break. Another good feature about this game was the fact that you could pick arcade and simulation modes, and that opened up a variety of gameplay. For example, if you just want to shoot around with your buddies and have a good fun, not taking something too seriously, you could play arcade mode, where basically the players never got tired and they were at their best during the whole game. But if you have people talking crap and you guys wanted to really get serious with the game, you could do the simulation mode that required a little more strategy with substitution and team management. So that was a nice touch depending on what mood you're in and how you wanted to play the game. So what about the difficulty in this game? Now, to be fair, this game can be challenging at Showtime level. That's pretty much the highest level you can go, but it's not impossible once you get the mechanics down. At preseason level, you can abuse the gameplay by constantly stealing the ball. Or if you really want to break the game, you can pick the East or West All-Star teams. Now, my buddy back in the day, and he would pick the All-Star East all the time. Swore he was good, swore could nobody beat him, and he had the nerve to get salty or pissed off if you countered by picking the West or the Bulls. Ain't that something? But if you are playing the game and you got somebody that just wants to go All-Star East and hog all the players, you don't got to worry about that, because you can actually have two Michael Jordans, two Larry Birds, or what have you. All you would have to do is, if somebody picks the East or the West teams, you could actually pick the regular NBA team with the superstar you wanted to play with. So for the most part, you could duplicate a large portion of the game roster. So overall, guys, I feel like Lakers vs Celtics for the Genesis is definitely worth playing today, and it's most definitely worth your time. I mean, in my honest opinion, this game was game-breaking at the time, and in its day, it led to EA making a ton of hits for the Sega Genesis. So if you never played this one or missed it as a kid or didn't own the Genesis in the late 80s, early 90s, definitely give this one a shot. No pun intended. I mean, I know they got the 2K series now, but at one time they had the NBA Live series that was amazing, and they kind of transitioned into 2K, well, obviously in 2K with the Dreamcast PS2 era. So, but guys, definitely check this one out. So that's going to do it for this review, guys. But as always, please rate, comment, and subscribe, so that way you don't miss any more gaming reviews or any gaming news on this channel. And with that, as always, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace, God bless you, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thank you for watching.